As mentioned in my biography this morning, one of my roles at Bozeman Health is serving on our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. A few years ago, we were tasked with creating a brief online learning module for all employees about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and what that means. We start off our module by asking what comes to mind when you hear the term cultural competency. Then we ask what comes to mind when you hear the term cultural humility. Cultural competency evoked knowing it all or knowing enough, as well as success or failure. You either are or aren't culturally competent. But cultural humility evoked learning, interest, curiosity. Cultural competency suggested that one could be competent in knowing someone else's culture, and that cultures could be boiled down to basic ideas that an outsider could learn. It also suggests a destination, an end point for learning. Once you achieve cultural competency, you've learned enough. Cultural humility is an approach to understanding, respecting the cultural identities of individuals and communities. Cultural humility focuses on a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation, self-critique, and it encourages individuals to recognize their own biases, power dynamics, and limitations of their cultural knowledge, while fostering open and respectful relationships with people from diverse backgrounds. When leaving the spiritual health office in the hospital, there is a framed quote next to the door. It reads, "Our first task in approaching another people, another culture, another religion, is to take off our shoes. For the place we are approaching is holy. Else we find ourselves treading on someone's dream. More serious still, we may forget that God was already there before our arrival." In a 2009 interview with Krista Tippett, Malka Haya-Fenyenvesi and Aziza Hassan talk about their interfaith work with a group called New Ground in Los Angeles. Hassan, a Muslim, was born in Jordan to a Palestinian Muslim father and an American Christian mother, and grew up first in Jordan and then in Kansas. She shared, "While growing up in Jordan for a good 17 years, I was constantly faced with that question. What are you, Muslim or Christian? Isn't one better than the other? And even questions like, your mom's going to hell, how do you feel about that? So I spent so much time praying as a child. I wanted my mom to go to heaven. And then we moved to Kansas. And all of a sudden, we had great neighbors. But they all thought I was going to hell, and my mom was going to heaven. Things got flipped, and it was an answer to my prayers, but not exactly what I really wanted." Fenyavesi, a first-generation Jewish American whose parents survived World War II and the Holocaust. She shares in her story, "My father came to the States in '56 like many Hungarians. My mother went from Hungary to Paris, and there they met in Paris in the early '60s. They came back to the States together in '64. They were children during the war, and my father was saved by a really amazing woman who manufactured forged documents in the basement of an apartment in Budapest. My mother was in Paris with her family, who were Hungarian, because it was somewhat of an easier place to be." New Ground is a Muslim-Jewish partnership for change that empowers Jewish and Muslim changemakers with skills, resources, and relationships needed to improve Muslim-Jewish relations and strengthen cooperations on issues of shared concern. On the Who Are We page on their website, it states, "At New Ground, we believe that conflict is natural and inevitable, yet it is not intractable. No matter the history, being stuck is a choice." This is something that Fenyvesi and Hassan talked a lot about in their interview. Both Muslims and Jews come to new ground with assumptions about the other. And in fact, they also come with assumptions about their own religious groups. One of the activities they do in their workshop is to write a list of words they associate with each religion, and then talk about what these words evoke in them. This offers what Fenyvesi and Hassan call a window into the experience of the other. They emphasize asking questions like, what does this mean to you? How does this feel when you hear it? In a setting where there is a lot of fear in the room and a lot of assumptions, curiosity is a virtue. Curiosity is valuing openness and care for the other. Curiosity can counter fear as well as defensiveness. How often have we been in a conversation or an argument, and something the other person says gets our hackles up and we go on the defensive? When this happens, we are no longer listening to what is being said. Instead, we are acting from a closed down place that shuts us off from the other person's experience. When I first started working as a chaplain, I would get defensive when a patient turned me away before I even got through introducing myself. I would visit a patient with the intention of introducing the spiritual health services, which includes saying, we are here for spiritual and emotional needs. We have no agenda of our own. We are trained to work with people of all faiths and no faiths. We are available for patients and families to center their needs and support them. But sometimes I barely get out the words, hi, I'm Katie from Spiritual, only to be told, I don't need you, or to be waved away without even a hello. This used to get me tied up in knots. If only they let me finish my introduction, they'd know I'm not a bad person. I'm here to help. It's taken many years, many dismissals, as well as some therapy, to get to the point where I now leave the room without taking it personally. These encounters aren't information about me. They are information about the patients. And I can be curious about why they acted the way they did. Often it's not appropriate to be curious in a moment where someone is telling me to get out, but there are times when it's not an outright dismissal, but a hesitancy or a quietness that I can engage with. Being curious about what is going on for the other person helps me stay present and engaged. It keeps the interaction relational instead of becoming all about me. Often these turn out to be quite successful visits because there's space for the patient to open up. And staying in a non-anxious and curious energy helps that to happen. Curiosity and the mindset of not knowing are important aspects of Zen Buddhism's concept of the beginner's mind. Shoshin, or the beginner's mind, refers to having an attitude of openness, eagerness, and curiosity. The practice of Shoshin acts as a counter to the hubris of closed-mindedness, often associated with thinking of oneself as an expert. This includes the Einstellung effect, where a person becomes so accustomed to a certain way of doing things that they do not consider or acknowledge new ideas or approaches. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, only a few. In an article called The Beginner's Mind, The Art of Not Knowing, Philippe Bastos explains the characteristics of psychological blocks to and reasons to cultivate the beginner's mind. The characteristics of a beginner's mind, he says, are openness, flexibility, and curiosity. Openness involves being open to seeing different perspectives and experiencing new things. Flexibility is the willingness to learn that defines children's minds, through which we can increase our ability to adjust to changing circumstances. Curiosity encourages us to explore new subjects, ask questions, and seek answers. Bastos goes on to say that our psychology can hold us back through confirmation bias and what he calls the curse of knowledge. He writes, "One of the biggest obstacles in the way of developing a beginner's mind is confirmation bias. This means our tendency to seek evidence that supports rather than contradicts our existing views. When our beliefs influence which information we choose to believe and why, we are prone to ignoring facts that contradict our opinions." Humans are incredibly susceptible to confirmation bias because our brains are wired to pay attention to certain kinds of stimuli while ignoring others. To combat confirmation bias, when you have an expert mind, you actually need to pay more attention, not less. By closely noting our thought process and asking questions like, how did I come to this conclusion? Can I prove this belief? Do I fully understand this issue? Or, what if I am wrong? We can take control of our critical thinking and prevent our brains from making decisions for us. Writing about what he calls the curse of knowledge, Bastos says, "By the time we reach adulthood, our brains have been hardwired for certain ways of thinking, due to years of knowledge-building experience. While this can be useful in growing levels of expertise in certain subjects, it means we may also struggle to look outside of our own headspace when approaching problems. Noticing our thinking patterns takes practice. However, if we approach situations with an awareness of our assumptions, we might notice things that other people miss entirely. Being curious can enhance our ability to solve problems, both for ourselves and others. If we drop expectations and are aware of our assumptions when interacting with others, our listening and our interpreting improve. In fact, one of the greatest gifts we can give another person is simply to be present with them. To stop trying to figure out what they really want to talk about, and instead, just allow them to tell us what they really need to share. We will never know it all. Being curious helps us live our values by showing care and openness to the experience of others. Humility keeps us grounded and respectful. I invite you this week to notice moments when you are making assumptions, and I challenge you to shift towards curiosity in those moments. I leave you with this quote by Katerina Eleftheriou. "Curiosity is the opposite of control. It's the agreement that you will allow yourself to be proven wrong."